Hey everyone, in today's episode, we are talking about something most of us use every day but rarely think about when it comes to security. That's your browser. It's not just a tool to surf the web anymore, it actually became one of the main targets of cyber threats. We have Dakshitaa Babu, a security researcher and product evangelist at SquareX. She explains how browsers are being used in attacks today, why that's a big deal, and what we can do with it. Whether you are someone building apps, working in security, or just curious about how online threats work, this episode is full of practical insights, real examples, and things most security blogs don't talk about. This is Abhisek, and you are listening to the Abhisek Cast. Shita, welcome to the show. So to get started with the episode, can we just walk us through on your journey, how you got into cybersecurity, how was your schooling going on, what are your college days, so something on that.
First of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It feels really good to contribute back to the community, which is really what the premise of the show is. So, hi everybody, I'm Dakshitaa Babu. I work as a security researcher and product evangelist at SquareX. So my background slightly non-linear, but I guess that's the case for most of us. I came from analytics and basically computer science background, and then I sort of pivoted into cybersecurity because I was looking for a field that could, make a lot of impact. And I wanted to make sure that whatever work I was doing was contributing positively on this earth. So I was looking at a couple of different industries like sustainability, maybe do some sort of like green analytics sort of thing. But I think we know what the reality of such ventures are. So I thought, okay, why not go into cybersecurity? It's a lot more hands-on. It's you can see what the outcome is directly when you protect against like certain attacks that are happening and so on. So that's really how I got into cybersecurity. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So I did check out your LinkedIn, and you were into venture capital analysis, and you are into data engineering as well. So once you're into cybersecurity field right now, so how does the background help you? Like, uh, do you get any +1 points on staying on other fields and coming into cybersecurity? Does that help you on so any ways?
Yeah. So, the reason I joined the venture capital firm is because I've always been very interested in startup ecosystem and just smaller companies that are a lot more efficient. So if you take a look at like how long we take to roll out a feature compared to how long like a larger company takes in terms of bureaucracy and all the layers of approvals you need to get, it's just a lot faster in startups. So in the beginning, I wanted to make sure like when I kickstarted my career, I have to work within smaller environments where I can grow and learn a lot. So even in my current role, I get to do a bit of sales, I get to do a bit of marketing, do a bit of the development as well as the product side of things. So it really puts me in a lot of different positions which I wanted to experience, and that's primarily why I started, exploring. Even when I was in the VC, I wasn't really doing what the typical analysts do. I was kind of being rotated among the different startups to contribute as much as I could. So in a way, it kind of just gave me like insights into the current ecosystem, at least in Singapore, where I'm based out of, what the startup ecosystem is like, how people work within the startups, as well as like all the different things you need to consider when running a company. It's not the same as when you're working for somebody else, right? All of these layers are abstracted away from you. But when you're there and you need to run that organization, you need to look for funding, you have to look for, the right kind of press messages to put out. There's just so many different things you need to think about. So all of those things really contributed to me when I came into this startup. So I'm a strong believer, there's certain type of people who know from very young what they want to do. Unfortunately, I was not blessed enough to be one of them. So I was still in the exploration phase, which I think primarily a lot of us are in. So I don't believe there's any wrong experience or, waste of time in trying out different industries and spaces. All of them contribute towards your character, they contribute towards the skill set that you have. So I might not have been hired for my sales or marketing skills, but because I had a little bit of experience in it, I could contribute towards that process in one way or another, right? So it's really just finding your sweet spot in just putting all of your experiences together to build your character moving forward.
That's a great answer, by the way. So you said you did mention that you did explore a lot of different paths before coming to cybersecurity or the venture capital engine. So, what are the other things that you tried exploring, and what are the other things that you felt interesting and finally ended up with cybersecurity? What was the negotiable points, or what are the upper side that you see on cybersecurity?
Right, right. So really all industries have their pros and cons. So I have worked in like finance industry, I've worked in with sustainability and a little bit of healthcare. So really every industry has like its way or its paradigms in which like, you can contribute different elements to. Cybersecurity is unique because you have to constantly be ahead of what the rest of the world is trying to do, not only in terms of the product. Like if you want to have a cybersecurity like startup, you want to run a product, your product has to be like the cutting edge. It has to be looking at all of the attacks before they even happen. Not only in terms of that, but also like in the technology growth, cybersecurity should try to be ahead of the growth of technology. So you kind of predict the attacks that are going to happen even before the technology is ready to support it. And only then can you truly protect all of the systems and all of the people who are in there. So I guess every industry has its unique pros and cons, but in my opinion, it's an incredibly interesting space to be in. And we always need more people to contribute towards cybersecurity. As we know, the tech space is so huge. There are like millions of people working on new technology every day. But that's not the same for cybersecurity, right? There's only a very small subset of us who are working on the protection, the defenses side of things. So yeah, that is different.
But so I do like the field in the same lines. Like since it is like we have to learn new things every day, we have to research and find out if there is something new coming up, and it's very interesting. So, when we get into cybersecurity, this is usually from the people, like there are a lot of misconceptions. So, people would think that they're just going to hack on something, social media and stuff, and all of a sudden, when we get into the field, it is not the point at all. So, was there this point in your career, like when since you were from a non-security role, did you face this? Or like when you see people coming across and asking you these questions, so how do you handle them?
Yeah, yeah. So I think what people really like about the whole cyber like hacker sort of feel is like the power that you have over somebody else, right? So when I can launch an attack, that literally gives me the power to get somebody's credentials, steal somebody's like bank account details, whatever that is. So that's really why people look up at it like, oh, you have some skills, you're able to deceive, you're able to, get access to my data. But that's not really a good thing, right? It's not really something to be proud of. It's like saying, hey, I'm really stealthy and I can do a good pickpocket move that you won't even be able to realize. Like, why are you bragging about it? So that's really the social connotation to it. But the field is very, very vast. I mean, hackers are such a small part of this entire cybersecurity realm. Red teaming is one big group, blue teaming is one big group. I mean, there's so many different aspects of it. So you can actually contribute. Like, it's good to think like a hacker, and that's primarily what my job scope is as well. To think like a red teamer, to think like an attacker. What would they do? What would a good attack flow be? How can I make this attack so seamless that I end up, causing a lot of people to fall for it? And the reason I have to think like that is so that my defense will make sure that it's assuming the user falls for this attack. Or how do I prevent this to make sure the user does not even have to interact with this page? I have to really be so good at attack to be really good at defense. And that's really why I think it's important to have a hacker mindset or important to have like a redeeming mindset. But at the same time, you must always remember that your goal in life is to protect, is to defend, because that is far superior than just hacking and getting a bunch of data.
I like to like putting out we are proactive players to find out what is going to come up and defend before it is happening.
Exactly, exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's move a little bit into browser security part. So when a person who is trying to get into the field, let's take any school students who is trying to play a CTF or a person who is from college learning cybersecurity specialized courses. So one of the easiest way to get into cybersecurity, I would say, is web application security, and then just from there they can move on to network and a lot of more stuff. But since you are new, you're like coming from a non-security role, but you chose doing browser security. So, what sparked you to choose browser security? Was that an incident or an write-up or an research paper? So, how did you choose browser security?
Yeah, so I agree with you. I think in the past, it was probably easier to start as a web app like pen tester and then move to the network side of things. But today, there's so many attacks that don't even require you to have any technical knowledge. Think about it, like you get phishing attacks. Somebody's trying to mimic another website. Somebody's trying to steal your credentials by posing to be somebody else. Like all of these social engineering attacks today, they're just based on deception. They're just trying to play with your head. They're trying to maybe change some elements on the page to make it look like it's something else. There's not much real technology that is going into it, other than the fact that the deception itself is just really, really good. It's like if you put out a fake ad and this ad is driving traffic to your malicious web page. Now, what is the real technology behind this? All you're really doing is to understand that product, buy a domain that is similar, and then you're putting up an ad for it, right? So a lot of attacks that happen today, they come through the browser. Most of them live and die within the browser. They don't even drop like malware to your local machine or whatever. So on, and a lot of things are rendered within the browser scape that the network traffic won't even be nuanced enough to tell you the difference. So if you take the example of a malicious ad, on the network, can you figure out if this ad was brand impersonating like a Facebook or something? It's impossible, because in the through the network you won't even be able to see what the ad was. You will have to see it visually to realize, hey, this is phishing, or hey, this is trying to impersonate Facebook, right? So we have actually transcended, like as an attack landscape has transformed, and today, as it stands, within the browser, there's so many different attacks that can happen that you have absolutely no clue from a network perspective or from your endpoint. So that is really why browser security today is like becoming much bigger, and compared to what we've been seeing for the past few years. And people are starting to realize that, hey, most of the attacks that people see today, they are originating from the browser, because every service you use is web based. Very few people these days are going to go install a local application to test out a new software. They're just going to go directly to the web application. You have very complex applications, like you have Figma, you have Canva, and all of these crazy amount of compute goes into all of these different elements that are being rendered on the page. But everything seamlessly loads within seconds within your browser engine, right? So the browser has become such a complex application on its own. They have so many different components on the browser. There's an extension ecosystem. The extension is like a whole vast ocean on its own. So many different types of extension, all different use cases. I mean, they inherently have some flaws in how we talk about security when it comes to extensions. Just so many different elements. Okay, let's take a look at authentications. All of these SaaS applications, how are you logging into them? Are you like reusing passwords across these services? Are you using like an OAuth? Are you using your company address or your personal address? There's really so many different nuances. So, in my opinion, today, for a person who's not completely hands on with cybersecurity yet, just take a look at the attacks that you yourself are receiving day to day. I'm pretty sure you've gotten scam emails. You've probably gotten some phone calls. You've probably seen some ads or some phishing pages on the web. So all of these are the starting points, really. So then you figure out like how is the attacker going about doing this. So the great thing about technology is that anybody can start writing out blog articles, anybody can start putting attack research together. So I've seen so many youngsters these days on LinkedIn. They create their own attack toolkits, and then they put it on GitHub, and then they have like some 800,000 followers. It's really good. It's amazing. I think the platform, like internet as a whole, is like democratizing all of this knowledge. So anybody from any corner of the world, it doesn't matter what language you speak, so long as you're producing all of this content that is helpful to the universe, people are appreciating, people are appraising. So I feel it's a lot easier for you to enter this industry today as compared to what it used to be in the past.
That's correct. I mean, at least on the cybersecurity world, I have seen a lot of people respecting a lot of new researchers who write great tools.
Exactly.
So that's definitely true. So on the same line, so to learn cybersecurity, right, there are definitely resources out there online, but they are scattered. So to specialize in a niche like browser security, so how are you able to find out the right resources to learn security, or you had to jump into multiple resources and to find things? What are the toughest challenges, and how was your learning curve on? browser security?
Yeah. So when I first started in browser security, there was no concept of like a browser security textbook or YouTube videos or anything like that. So we had to be the first to write out all of these resources. I mean, we had a couple of competitors who were also pushing out their resources, but we, as a company, we were the first to write the browser security field manual book. Happy to share that copy with you as well. So we are also like preparing a couple of other materials in this field. So we've actually done that. A lot of this, collated a lot of these resources together, packaged it into books. We've spoken at a lot of conferences, given a lot of different talks on this topic as well. So if you're trying to create like a new category in cybersecurity or in any field for that matter, then you'll have to do the hard work of trying to plow all of these resources, putting them together. But I mean, it's not that different from what you already know. So obviously networking concepts, they also follow through in the browser. It's just slightly different. The protocols used in the browser is slightly different. They have like other sort of alternative communication channels, like web WhatsApp uses like WebSocket, and then binary data gets transmitted through that. So a lot of transferable skills from other aspects of security. But browser security, I guess the fundamental is really understanding how user uses a certain web application. What is the user's flow of events? And that is really the basis in which attackers go about orchestrating attacks. Can you embed elements within a page? Can you maybe put a browser within the browser? All of these are attacks that exist today. Just innovations in the space on how to exploit the browser engine.
So, since you have definitely attended multiple conferences, like, so how do you see browser security being demonstrated over there? So, what are the gaps that you notice apart from like there are like different fields they are going to present different new researches, and is there any gap that you see with browser security specifically?
Yeah. So, I mean, from the beginning, there has always been like an education gap. So, I guess the companies that are coming up with browser security solutions, we are like trying to educate the market on why you need a browser security solution. So that is something that we have to actively do because we have to educate the market that there's a void in all of your security solutions, and this is something that you need, right? So a lot of the talks that we give and that we've seen our competitors give as well are like the cutting edge attacks that are happening today and how to go about protecting it. And why is it that your existing EDR solutions, your secure web gateway, and your SASE stack is unable to solve for this particular attack? So those are all things that we share about. It is, I mean, it's growing. I would say in the past few years, we've seen it grow. There are more people who recognize these attacks today. So in a way, that's good. As I think anything new that you begin, there has to be like a progression, right? So in a way, it's good. So I'm hoping in the next few years this gap will be bridged and people recognize it as like Gardner has to recognize it as a category and kickstart things. Yeah.
Got So let's go a little bit into the browser's technical part. So just a note here, I'm not into browser security. I'm just a person who is into application and network security. I obviously know there are certain protections that are in place for the client-side attacks that happens on application security. So to the listeners who aren't familiar with browser attacks, so what is the higher level working of an browser? How does a modern browser work? So what are the behind the scenes that happens on a browser?
Yeah. So browser is incredibly complex engine. It has many different components. So let's just take a look at a web page to begin with. So every web page is kind of running in like an isolated environment. In this isolated environment, the engine will basically be running whatever the web page needs. So the web page typically has HTML, CSS, JavaScript, and then it also can use other components of the DOM, so the document object model, where it can go about embedding like canvas elements. It can go about embedding, iframes and all the other things that you have available on the web page. So because of all of these layers that it has, the web page itself is quite powerful. So let me give you an example. Let's say you land on a web page, and the web page is asking for like notification permission, and you go about saying, "Yeah, sure, alert me," right? And you close the tab. So now a lot of people think that once you close a tab, it can't do anything to you, it's gone, right? But notification essentially sets up like a service worker which is persistent. So what this does is even after the web page is closed, it could be like weeks after, you can still get notification from that page. And the bad thing about this is that this notification comes from an operating system level. So you just keep getting a user interface that is like system level user interface for your notifications. So it's a lot harder for you to process the fact that this was the website that I gave access to many days ago, and that's the website that is still sending me notifications, right? It's a little bit of a complex scenario. So again, there's so many different things. I can ask for camera, I can ask for microphone, they can ask for full screen. I mean, so many different permissions that a web page has and that it can ask for. It can also even embed like another browser window within the page. So that's what we call a browser in the middle or browser in the browser attack. So recently we did a huge press release on our latest attack research where we found, especially in Safari, when you go into like if you have a browser that's embedded and that internal browser goes into full screen, Safari does not give you any indication that the internal browser has gone into full screen. So now that browser could be an attacker controlled browser, and they could be exfiltrating all of your data and you had no idea that's happening because you don't even know that you're currently in full screen mode. So that's something that we just put out. So all of this happens just from a web page. Like I'm not even going into any other part of the browser. Um, there's a lot of different nuances to it, so I'm pretty sure the audience can go about looking it up. But I'll just hit another aspect of the browser, which is browser extensions. So extensions basically sit on a layer above all of these web pages, so they can actually act on any of them depending on what permissions they ask for. And extension has a whole permission ecosystem that they can ask for your location, they can ask for your history, your tabs, scripting to execute scripts and so on. So and Google has like a list of ranking for these permissions, which are highly permissive, which are like, okay, it's a little bit safer. So if you take a look at like safe permissions, you have, for example, active tab. So you basically allow the extension to execute on the tab that is active on your web page. So let's say you're currently on Gmail and this extension has access to act on your Gmail. With the scripting permission, what it can do is to basically use your authenticated session. You're already logged into Gmail. It can use your authenticated session to send out an email behind the scenes because you've just given it tab permissions, you've given it scripting permissions. And so, I mean, it sounds so harmless because that's not what it was meant to be used for. But this is something that any extension is capable of doing. So that is really where you can see this extension space is quite flawed, but at the same time, incredibly powerful. Um, for SquareX, we use the extension as our defense mechanism. Our solution is deployed as an extension, and that way we have all of these access to do all of these amazing things that we do in the defense space. But yes, malicious actors use that to for their malicious activities. So um, yeah, so I've covered the web page, I've covered the extensions. I guess the other components of the browser, like the history, the bookmarks, all of that comes under the browser vulnerabilities, like native to the browser itself. So every time you see a new CVE, Chrome says, hey, you need to update this. All of those come under the architecture of the browser itself and vulnerabilities that you find in the browser. So attackers can also exploit that. So maybe somebody found a new vulnerability that says cross origin policy can be bypassed, and then they can use that to go about launching some attacks. So that comes under browser vulnerabilities. So you have a lot of like web attacks that happen within the web pages, maybe files that are downloading from web pages, identity attacks, and all of that stuff. You have the extension ecosystem that is like one layer above, and then you have browser vulnerabilities which are associated with the application itself.
Got it. That's really interesting. Like the the attack that you mentioned on Firefox, right? Going to and full screen and just showing like in browser and it works that way. It was interesting, and it is good to know like there are different types of attack vectors that is available on browsers as well. So there are a lot of different defensive mechanisms that is implemented on browser. For example, let's take content security policy or cross-origin resource sharing. So these are some defense mechanisms that helps us in preventing of application executing scripts or loading some images or doing some cross-origin talks, right? But these all end up in the configuration part where how the client side and the server side is configured with, and if there is going to be an wildcard or a misconfiguration in place that is going to be bypassed, right? So even though these mechanisms are in play and they are like an feature that is available for the developers out there, they can use it. But most of the develop, not everyone, but there are considerable amount of developers who are not aware of these things. So how do you see these gaps, and um, what would be an effective way of like addressing these attacks from your point of view?
Absolutely. So, this is like a very important question. And I think it's important that every developer knows the fundamentals of cybersecurity and thinks security when he's doing the design. And the reason I say that is because very large organizations, they tend to separate the teams. They have a development team, like the core devs, and then they have a separate security teams. So the devs will come up with whatever code they need to, and then they'll pass it on to the security team. Then the security team will go about making the changes that they need to, and then this will go to production. So the problem with this is that they don't understand each other's way of thinking, right? So that means inherently there's going to be some gaps. Like the security team might not really understand what the dev's perspective was or why he needed to implement a certain feature. So they might not even understand how to properly secure it end to end, and vice versa, right? So the best ideal case scenario is that every dev in the company has both security and dev knowledge, so that everything that they build is done in a secure way. So for our company, this is like a must have, right? So everything that we build, we have to make sure we put security first. Otherwise, we can't even be providing this service for anybody else. So that should be the case, and it should be the global standard for everybody else. I think, unfortunately, there's some gaps in this system, and that's not the case. But if you're starting out, I think this is the best asset that you can have. You have to have both development as well as security knowledge. Yeah.
Got it.
Uh,
So yeah,
Sorry. Especially with
yeah,
the
yeah, please
vibe
go on.
coding, a lot of vibe coding, a lot of AI-based code excerpts that are coming out. I feel like it's causing people to understand development less, but understand security even less. And this is like just bad on all fronts. So I guess it's great. Like for us, simulations, like prototyping, we use AI all the time, right? Amazing, works really well, efficient. But at the end of the day, if I'm going to push something to the end client or to the customer, I'll have to make sure that I have the knowledge to scrutinize all of that. So yes.
That's true. There's definitely a problem. Like when there is an wipe coded application or any like AI specific coded application, like most of the developers, like not most, like people who are mostly relying on the AI tools, they aren't aware of how the code works and what are the component it is having and where the problem is actually from. So it is actually a major issue. So the next question that I'm trying to bring up is from our previous guest. So like we were talking about cloud security. So on that parts we discussed about a problem statement where like I was asking him about what will be an interesting problem he would like to solve. So where he mentioned was one of an interesting idea is to customize browsers based on companies' preferences. So he was talking on that lines because every company like IT companies uses browser, but they have different use cases and they wanted protections and customizations in different ways. So how do you see this as an startup idea, and does SquareX align with this idea?
Yeah. So, just to give you some background in browser security, there's only two ways to go about so far, two ways to go about implementing a browser security solution. So, the first thing is the security solution has to sit within the browser somehow, right? It has to be embedded because the minute you go outside the browser, you lose a lot of visibility to what's happening inside. So, the only two ways is one, to create your own browser, two is to create a browser add on or extension. So only two approaches, and that's the two approaches we're seeing in the market today as well. So we have seen a lot of enterprise browsers come up. Today, there's a lot of AI browsers that are coming up as well. I don't know if you heard about Art Browser. They recently stopped their build, and then they're moving towards Dia, which is another AI-based browser. So it's great to have a custom browser for each corporation. In fact, it's even better to have a custom browser for each department. If you think about it, there are AI browsers today that's going to be helping developers a lot more. Then there's going to be a different set of AI browsers or whatever browsers for like the marketing teams and so on. So the truth is, if you want to put a security solution in this, you have to be agnostic to what browser the user is using. So the security solution should be able to deploy on any browser that anybody picks. And that's the reason why we believe that the add-on approach or the extension approach is superior to the enterprise browser. Now, to have one standardized enterprise browser for a company, it's a lot of maintenance that people don't usually think about. So it's going to be a fork of Chromium, most probably, because it's almost impossible to create a brand new browser from scratch without using like a Chromium framework. Even for Arc browser, they built their own ADK, and then that was like a patented technology that they spent years developing, right? So it's not a simple ask. So let's say you're going to create a Chromium fork. Now we know Chromium has vulnerabilities and these get surfaced like every day, right? So you have to make sure that your patch management to your custom browser happens so fast that you don't lag behind Chromium vulnerabilities. So when we took a look at some statistics, till today, the browser that is the fastest to patch is Chrome, and Chrome usually takes about 1 to 2 days. And every other browser, including Brave browser, which I'm an absolute fan of, takes at least 4 days to patch a certain vulnerability. At least it's just the relay of information and then the processing to create. I mean, Chrome team is huge, right, compared to every other browser team. So if you have a custom browser in your enterprise, these are all the things you need to think about. Who's going to maintain them? How is the patch management going to roll out? If the window that you take, even if it's like 1 week, that's far too long. You could have your entire organization, compromised just because the browser wasn't patched in time. So these are all just the things to think about. So it's always good to have an option. But in my opinion, tried and tested commercial browser, we pick the one that is like the most maintained. It could be Edge and Chrome. I think between the two, Edge is probably a bit more secure by design, but Chrome is the fastest in patch management. So pick one, use that for management, add on whatever you want to add, customize it on top of it, with add-ons and IDP and all that stuff.
So, since we talked about extension, right, you did mention about what are the things the extensions can access and what are the scripting abilities that it has. So, in organizations, we right now we are at a lot of places we are having AI policies where when the people are working with company sensitive data, it is not supposed to be put on any kind of LLMs, right? So, since the extensions that we are in play, and if the companies aren't aware of what are the extensions that are in place, for example, it can be any grammar corrections or just some parsing solution out there. So, again, it's gonna have what I'm reading or what I'm looking on the screen. So it can be company critical data or not. So either way, so it has access to that. And do we have any researchers done on this lines, like the extension which have access to the text that it is passing towards, and it is used for building their own like a data supplement for their own LLM. So is there any researchers or thoughts came across on the same lines?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up. So this is what we call Gen AI data leakage prevention as well as extension management. Both of things that SquareX helps with, but there are other browser security solutions that provide these services as well. So first thing is for extension management, once you deploy a browser security solution, you get complete visibility to every extension that every employee has installed. Okay, so now you have that grand like view, which currently no other solution gives you. With this view, you can then go about the browser security platform will provide you with insights as to how risky a certain extension is, based on like their permissions, their statistics, their owners like reputation, as well as dynamically analyzing the extension as well. So SquareX is one of the first companies out there who's done like dynamic analysis of extensions, where we actually simulate how the extension works in like a isolated like a container, and then figure out whether there's any sort of malicious intention or not. So there is an extent to which we can do this. Like we can tell if data is being exfiltrated, but behind the scenes, whether they're using it to train their LLM model or not, that's not something that any solution has visibility to. So for that, we'll have to rely on like their privacy policy, dig deep on like what they promise legally and just use that as like a to build the case. So with all of this information, we'll then recommend to the clients, hey, these are the high risk extensions that we think you should not allow. These are extensions that we think you should buy the corporate accounts for, because for like things like Grammarly, they have like a paid account. So if you use a paid account, they promise that they're not going to use your data for training. So then if it's like a corporate use case and it's important, we can then convince the clients to go about making that purchase. So these are all things that we take a look at. Now, it's not just for extensions, all of these AI applications, there's like thousands of them and new ones coming every day where this fork, like take a fork of ChatGPT, add something to it, and then they're like, okay, here's a new AI for you. So we, as a browser security solution, you can constantly monitor what users are inputting into every single web page that they go into. So I can see if somebody is trying to type in something, they're trying to paste some information, or they're trying to upload a file, and this file is like a sensitive document. All of this analysis happens on the fly as it's happening, right? So really, the Gen AI data leakage prevention space has grown tremendously because now you have AI embedded in like chatbots, you have AI on search bars, you have AI literally every inch of the web, right? So then how do you monitor and which is like okay for an enterprise and which is not so okay? So in SquareX, we use a logged in domain detection. So we figure out what account you're using. Is it a personal account or is it like a corporate account? And then based on that, we can give you some insights on whether this is like an allowed action or it's not. So a vast field you've just opened up, but yes, thank you for that question.
So it's great to see that you have a very granular protection about what people can do. And it's very interesting to hear. Just wanted to make sure one thing, like, does SquareX also pass the privacy policy and stuff? Give us insights on that. Like, what you mentioned about, like, if the company is using the data for training things, right?
Yeah. So yes, that is one of our data points as well. So when we do our analysis, especially for extensions, we'll go about doing a deep dive into the privacy policy of the extension to figure out what they're really using the data for. Yeah.
Got it. So, to talk a little bit more about browser-specific vulnerabilities. So, for example, on the cases of application or a network or on mobile or any such protection field. So, when you are trying to find out some vulnerabilities that might be theoretical, and bringing out an POC for those kind of attacks is kind of bit hard. So, is there any hurdles that you see on browser security, like attacks being mostly explained on theoretical part, but still they do consider it as a potential risk and take it forward and fix. So, how do you see this theoretical vulnerabilities part on browser security?
So great question. I think for browser, the main problem is this: a lot of functionality can be exploited or abused. So a lot of times when I log a certain bug, the team or like the Chrome team or whichever team that I'm applying to, they tend to dismiss my submission as an abuse rather than a vulnerability. Right. So you can consider this like I'm not sure if you heard about recently there was this PayPal incident. So within PayPal, if you log in and you change your address, there's an alert that PayPal sends to your email. So what the attacker did was to actually put a custom message in that address field so that when the alert was sent to a email, the email looked as if it came from PayPal and whatever he typed in was written in the message. And in that message, he basically said like, "Hey, you need to reset your PayPal account or whatever you got compromised, whatever that message was." So now, how do you look at this? Now, an attacker is sending a victim an email using PayPal's no reply at paypal.com, right? Which is the official PayPal email address. He's abusing the system. But at the same time, this is a vulnerability that they should patch because they should not be allowing people to type in custom text in an email that is being triggered, right? So a lot of these things you will notice when just interacting with the web applications. Um, a couple of bugs that I've filed currently, they're like being investigated for abuse risks because people think that it's a legitimate functionality. I need to have it there. If people want to abuse it, that's on them. It's not really on us. A lot of developers on the app side of things, that's kind of like the connotation that they have. So a lot of attacks today, they exploit legitimate websites. They exploit like SharePoint, they host malicious content on it. Google Sites, Google sites, I've seen so many malicious ads. So when you just Google search for something, the sponsored result is sites.google.com because somebody hosted something on that page. You go there and then they direct you to someplace else or embed some malware. We ourselves have simulated so many attacks where we managed to install like WannaCry directly from Google sites. And this is great because a lot of your firewalls and your SASE solutions will whitelist google.com, right? So sites.google.com is going to be a whitelisted domain. Now I can literally send you any malware through it and it will not get like flagged as a malicious website. So a lot of different abuse mechanisms that you can find. But yeah, that's where the bug bounty comes from.
Okay, got it. So, since we talked about a lot about developers being unaware about the security solutions that are in place and available, but that is not used on application. So, this is like an must-do point. Like, if a developer is asking, like, trying to build a new application, and they had to have some make sure things on their application. So, what are the things that you will ask them to have as a basic need? Like even building out an MVP should have all these things. So, what will be your answer for this question?
Right. I guess when you're coming up with like a piece of code, you probably have to think about how can this be abused or how can somebody you know figure out a loophole in what I'm building and do something else. You'll have to think of all the possibilities. It's a little bit hard for me to think about a solution that is generic to all because, there's so many different types of developers and so many different applications out there. But I guess the fundamental is, say you're adding an input box. Now you can't just have the data ingested directly on like the front end or something. Like you have to think about how people can probably abuse that. Maybe they will like spam a bunch of like input. They could even exceed, like if you don't set a character limit, then they could just send like chunks and chunks of data. They could even send like an entire malware like in bytes through that input box. So a lot of things you need to consider. I've even seen websites, simple thing like enterprise lead form, and a lot of people have client side verification for your email, which I think it's not advisable at all. So literally when I put in my email and let's say they want to block out all their competitors, they don't want their competitors to get access to their content. And a lot of these validation is done on the front end. So I type in an email, it says no, whatever. And then I just hit the developer console and I see in the network request and I can see the entire laundry list of domains that they're blocking, including every single one of their competitors. That's not good, right? And this is like a multinational company, billions of dollars in revenue. So really the developer has to consider from the user's perspective and also from a malicious actor's perspective.
Got it. So, from a research point of view, so on browser security parts, what do you see some of the areas to be explored very little? So, what are the gaps that you notice on that part? And if someone is trying to do a research on browser security, what would a segment that you would pick and proceed?
So I think that when people are starting out today, like youngsters, a lot of them start off with like the whole EDR bypass, malware dropping to the disk. But the attackers have far moved from that. I mean, a lot of people try to not hit your disk at all. They try to orchestrate the attack entirely in the browser. And the reason they do that is because they know you have a EDR, but the odds of you having a browser detection response is far lower. So today, I think not explored as much is like fileless, just absolutely within the browser end to end. How can I do the entire attack chain, and how can I even traverse the network, or get other people like also compromised through like a single account compromise. All of those things, I think people can start looking into a bit more. So recently, we published browser native ransomware, and that's essentially saying that, hey, if a attacker has access to one application, and this could be like Dropbox with all of your enterprise files inside, and the attacker can just go about deleting all of those files or encrypting all of those files, making it ransom, leaving a ransom note behind and saying that, hey, you got to pay me this much to get all these files back. And that is just browser native ransomware. It's entirely happening within the browser. It's happening on the SaaS application. None of these files are local. None of these files are backed up anywhere except the cloud drive that is meant to back up everything. So it's really a very potent attack. We've started seeing a little bit of it in the wild as well. So yes, definitely, I would say.
Okay. Okay. And again, to the researchers who are trying to learn browser security, what are the resources that you would recommend to look upon? It can be any books or open source documents, CTF challenges. What would be your recommendation on that front?
I don't know how many public resources there are for browser security in general. I would say just follow a bunch of companies who are doing browser security in this space, at least enterprise browsers, browser extensions. Most of the time, industry changes happen because a few companies want to make that change, right? If you take a look at like next generation firewall, like who called it next generation? Like Palo Alto came in and then they called it next generation firewall, and now we all learn that terminology, we all learn how it works. So it really happens because like the driving force is businesses. So we can always start there, find a bunch of different companies. A lot of different enterprise browsers are there. It doesn't even have to be like browser security, but some people even do use enterprise browser for key management, all of that sort of identity access management stuff. People use it like older companies, hard drive companies also have like a browser to communicate with their hard drive. So many different things out there. We can just do a bunch of research on all of those and start following them.
Got it. That's great. And since you are working at SquareX, obviously you would have met Vivek, and he's a very well-known person in cybersecurity space. So, just to know a little bit about him, like if there is a problem statement that he is trying to tackle on or work upon, so how does he tackle things, and how is your experience with working with him?
Yeah, so he is an incredibly influential character. And, 20 years ago, he was probably one of the first to write his book on wireless networking. And, 20 years later, he's one of the first to write his book on browser security. So he really, is industry first or like veteran in this space. So it's really nice. I mean, it's a great opportunity to work with him and learn from him. I think his vision for SquareX is really to be the industry's first browser detection and response solution, which we are. We were the first to coin that term. It's something that he came up with, and it's also our product stays true to that. So a lot of enterprise browsers, when they first came about, they came in as productivity tools or tools for management, so that admin can basically say Department A should only have access to these applications, Department B can only access these web applications. Here's some internal applications that you can access only through our browser. So all of these access control was why enterprise browsers came about. But Vivek came in and he said, no, but we need a browser solution that is constantly monitoring everything the user does and then dynamically figuring out what threats are coming his way on that application. It could be somebody he's interacting with, it could be some file that is being downloaded, whatever that is. So he was really the visionary for SquareX, and he was the one who came up with this browser detection and response. And I think in because of him, we've been transforming browser security and pushing it more towards the security aspects rather than just the access control side of things.
That's great to know. And coming to the final part, so what would be one piece of advice that you would like to give the viewers to, like, on the parts of browser security or on the parts of cyber security in the whole? So what would be your answer to that? And like, what are the steps they can take to improve on this field? So some lines on that.
Yeah. So the key thing about cybersecurity is theory is not enough, right? It's one of those things. It's like a doctor who's very good at reading his notes, but does not know how to save a life. So in cybersecurity, you have to practice. And a great way to practice is to just start doing your analysis and putting it out in LinkedIn or Mastodon or whatever platform that you're on. So, and it's free, right? To do your analysis, it's free. To post it, it's free. All you really need to do is to invest your time and effort in doing that research and just get your hands dirty and start putting it out. I think the great thing about uh, youngsters publishing their research online is that people like me who are constantly looking out for like what's the latest threats, what are the latest like techniques people are using. We don't care about your age, we don't care about your background and what language or whatever you speak, which university you went to or what grades you got. We just care that the research you did is valuable. So I'm sure that if you're looking to get hired, this is number one priority that they have as well. And if you have put out like some GitHub repo, that's like a great brand that you've created for yourself, a great portfolio that you've built for yourself. And that is something that is going to be a lot more valuable than your school certificates. So I would say just get started, get your hands dirty, do some analysis, do some research, read all of these articles that are coming out. These days, I think almost 80% of attacks that are happening, they originate, maybe 90%, they originate in the browser, and the journalists who write about them, they have mentioned like this is how the attack came in. This was the social engineering that the attacker did. Then go out and try to orchestrate this by yourself. See how people are doing it, and then figure out like what is the best strategy around protecting against this attack as well. Yeah.
Got it. That's a great answer, by the way. And also, it is great having you on my show. Thanks
Thank
for joining us.
Thank you so much. It was a really great session. Uh, Wonderful questions, and I hope that your audience like it. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much.